welcome back to ILC. 21st broadcast, can you believe it or not, since towards the end of March, something I was reviewing for a reason I'll mention in a few minutes. As always, thanks for the support, particularly our corporate partners, CoreLogic, Carpenters, iCabbing and Innovation Group, without whose support this would be pretty tough. But thanks most of all to you. Some fantastic feedback, as weeks, some great suggestions, great contributions to the debate afterwards, as well as from the panellists that we have involved every week, which is really great. So any ideas you've got, just give me a shout at alan@isleofclaims.com. The next 2 weeks are going to be podcasts. We had last week. Next week, very interesting. We're going to follow up, as we promised, the webinar on the subsidence, the possibility of the subsidence surge. And we've got some new facts and graphs out from people like Mike Lawson. So we're going to be recording that one for next week. We'll then go halfway through August and have a clearer idea of what kind of year it might be, on top of all the other issues we've got as well. And the week after that, the podcast will be with the 3 people who were involved in our very first webinar. And we're going to have a chat with them and what's been happening since. So that's Steve Kennedy, Sean Kelly and Will Quibell. So they'll be back talking to us as well. We look forward to that. Couple of plugs. The building conference still going ahead 1st of October. We're looking forward to that with all the safety measures in place. And also some exciting news we're going to be announcing about a new way that we're going to hold our home event this year in the current circumstances. Because the demand for attendance at our whole conference is so high, we're going to have to do something slightly different this year. So the week commencing the 9th of November free, because we've got exciting news over the next few weeks to announce about that. We've covered a lot in the 21 broadcasts we've had so far. We looked at supplier management and the challenges and the support that was required. We had some great news in that and some very, very good bits of feedback about how we work together. So we're going to have a little bit of an update in that today. Where's that come? Has it changed much? Are we still what's the current position? And I'm really pleased to have with us today Jason Ward, the Claims Supplier Lead at Ageas. Welcome back to Colin Mulder, the Claims Supplier Relationship Manager at LV, and Peter Wassell, the Technical Director at Sedgwick's Repair Solutions. As always, their opinions are their own, and they're usually a lot better than most, I have to say. But when you get the questions and chats, that if you want to join in, we might get a chance to do. But I guess, first of all, it's over to the panel who we've tuned into here. So let's start, let's start with you, Jason. Now, in terms of supplier management, we're now sort of 4 or 5 months into a pandemic. Things aren't that clear. How's it looking for you?
Yeah, thanks, Alan. Firstly, to anybody watching, apologies if you see me grimace during the course of this webinar. Torn ligament in my knee. It's nothing to do with the content or what anybody's saying. It's me managing my pain threshold. I think, first of all, Alan, probably a thank you, really, to everybody in the industry in terms of where we are today. Massive mobilisation from insurers, my colleagues on here, and their colleagues, to get us all working from home. Supply chain doing similar, all the while managing those same challenges that we see our customers having, childcare, high risk dependencies, isolation. So, I think the industry has responded fantastically. Where we are today, I think we're starting to get back to a bit of a new normality, if you like. Our engagement with supply chain is starting to return to something like it previously was. I think working with panel, we've a good understanding of where we are in terms of claims volumes, work in progress, resource, and where that can be deployed. I think we're trying as much as possible to keep that BAU approach. I think we're still seeing some challenges with customers. I think there's still some nervousness about suppliers visiting. I think we're all very mindful of local lockdown challenges, as we've seen in Leicester and northern parts of the country. But I think what we have is a healthy understanding of what's worked well till now, what we can build on off the back of that. And I think trying to get back to some of those working relationships that we were having pre-COVID-19 and the start of lockdown. So what were those projects and engagements we were on with supply chain? What can we reinvigorate and get moving again? What perhaps did we have on the radar that the last few months has changed in terms of our direction of travel? So I think all in all, in a reasonably positive position given what's happened.
Thanks, Jason. I think, a lot of learning there. I did say earlier that everybody's opinion was your own. I just want to disassociate myself from Rob Smale is going on to chat telling you you're looking old, Jason. I'll give you a little bit of time to think of your retaliation when I'm sure Rob will be expecting. He's not your boss anymore, so you can a little bit better. Colin, you've been earlier. We talked about various scenarios and a lot of the good work that you were doing with things like your contractor network, etc., and suppliers going in. How's it standing now? Because things have moved forward, but haven't in some ways as well. So the uncertainty is still there. So how are you seeing supplier management at the moment at LV?
I think we went through the crisis period, the getting emergency plans in place for everything we need to do, much the same as Jason has just talked about. We've probably moved on now to the tidying up phase, I would probably call it, where initially we definitely need to keep an eye on our teams and make sure that our teams are motivated and engaged. And the whole isolation thing isn't getting to them. And if that's a slightly more relaxed management approach, some people would have said that my approach to management was quite relaxed in the first place anymore, but it's still staying in that direction. And similarly with the suppliers, but there are some key things that we need to keep an eye on. Things like the sort of safe working guides that I think we've all issued to keep our own customers, but also the suppliers' staff safe, but also out of trouble. There is a concern that some of the claims farming companies may start using COVID as a building the next PPI, if you like. What we don't want to do is expose anyone to the virus, but also anyone to claims against their companies at some point in the future. So that's been a key focus for us. Similarly, on the risk side, we've been looking at data protection, where we're all working from home now, and that's quite a few companies, the likes of Sedgwick, who are on the call today, they will have been working from home for a long time, but a lot of our suppliers probably aren't quite so used to that. And actually, there are some traps and habits that people can fall into, like using personal emails if they can't log on through their VPN tokens or anything along those lines. And those kind of things just aren't a good idea. You're exposing yourself and your company to all sorts of trouble and pain in the future. And we've had a couple of examples of things like that. Nothing serious, but it is something that we've been asked to go out and double check in with all of our suppliers. Other than that, my focus has mainly been on playing golf, so my handicap has come down quite nicely. So there you go. I'd just like to point out, because it's bothering me, that up there is, I'm not being invaded by a Dalek. That is just my sky dish.
I think we should have a prize for the person who describes it with the most likeable or funny item, but we'll see. I think the interesting point that you were talking about there, Colin, is noticeably how the things that we focus on in terms of detail for things that people working at home have now moved from the initial phase of how they settle down, how they discipline themselves, how they deal with it from a well-being perspective, to some of the areas that arise, I guess, after using personal emails, doing things out of perhaps the right motivation, but that's quite interesting. To you, and we always have this every week, you can sit in the middle here, so you have to concentrate on being a supplier, while you have to also think about managing and guiding and helping suppliers to Sedgwick's. How are you finding things at the moment?
I guess actually probably the first thing to start off with, Alan, is to echo what Jason said, which is a really big thank you to all of the contractors that are doing the repairs. And I say that because I think it's important for us to stop and remember that repairing people's homes in the best of times is a really difficult thing. People think that being a builder is easy, that you can make lots of money. It's hard. That's evidenced by, the constant reports that you get in the media of businesses that have collapsed. And we always need to be mindful of that. So our contractors have done an absolutely fantastic job in repair solutions and throughout the industry in coping with what for them I think are probably circumstances that are probably in truth far greater than we've all coped with. You mentioned about working at home, Alan, and as was mentioned, in repair solutions, most of us have been home workers for many years. Cardiff call centre, all the people there are now working at home. So we've coped with that, but it's far, far different from the challenges that the contractors have and are rising to. And one of my colleagues said to me this morning, he said it's looked like a chess game because something happens, we have to move and adapt. And then the next move happens, we move and adapt. At the moment, the contractors have moved and adapted to the situation we have at the moment. But I think we're all mindful that change is probably very likely to happen in the very near future once again.
That's a very apt point. I think contractors do take a bit of stick in the industry sometimes, like all suppliers. But yeah, it is difficult getting into people's homes, and we certainly shouldn't forget that it's not solely about policyholders being nervous about contractors getting into their homes. It's about people who are tradesmen who are used to working in a domestic background must be worried about getting into people's homes, depending on how seriousness the homeowners are taking the pandemic, because it may well be that some of the people that we traditionally use and struggle to get a hold of might think that all of a sudden working in a new build site is a safer option than going into unknown houses. So that's another thing we've got to watch. So Jason, we talked through it. We've got all the initial stages, we're moving around, but what is changing just now? So I don't necessarily mean what's changing in the pandemic, because that changes on a very regular basis. But now what's changing in terms of focus and how we might be able to deal with what's going to be a bit of uncertainty over the coming months?
Yeah, well, I think individually some of the suppliers are changing. We're seeing sort of restructure and reorganisation in their companies, something that we've got to be mindful of and look to engage with them in the right way. I think those challenges of working from home are going to be around with us for a considerable period of time. And they bring positives as well as the challenges. It gives a bit more flexibility to the way you use your resource. So we've got to try and work with that and work with suppliers on that basis. I think we're going into a period now of recession, which equally is going to bring challenges, especially to suppliers that have already seen claims volume downturns as a result of COVID-19. And whilst, we're seeing a return to business as usual claims volumes now, we're also seeing a change still in that peril mix. Historically, claims perils that would have been higher, theft, for example, with more people working from home. We're seeing a shift, downturn in that, increase in accidental damage claims. We might be seeing the same number of instructions going out to the supply chain in total, but we're seeing a different mix in there in terms of who's being used. So we've got to be mindful to the impact of that with the supply chain and look to see how we best support those partners moving forward. With half an eye on the period we're going into, which potentially could lead to, again, local lockdown, national lockdowns, but also potential surges, which I know we'll touch on later.
I think that's fair, and it is a matter of helping them. And Colin, some of these suppliers are going to move into a new challenge now, aren't they, with furlough beginning to disappear. Some of the financial aspects of survival of this is not just a small business issue, this is an overall business issue, as we've seen in the high street and elsewhere. So how are we able to keep tabs on the suppliers to, one, help them, which a lot of insurers have been very keen to do, and two, identify when a problem might be coming up, because there's nothing worse for for insurers, absolutely nothing worse than companies disappearing while they're halfway through a job. The damage that does to the company and the people involved. So there are potential nightmares there if we can't see things coming. So what are your sort of thinking and plans in dealing with that?
Okay, so on exactly that point, a couple of weeks ago, one of my colleagues at LV organised a training session on how to in-depth read an Experian report. I learned a lot that day, I have to say, because I didn't realise that there was as much information. You always felt it was a bit out of date, but there's some really good clues in some of the Experian reports. And if there's anybody else on here who hasn't done it, feel free to contact me or Alan, and we can pass on the details of the person who provided the training. That's one thing, is looking at cash flow issues, but actually talking to your contractors and suppliers. The sensible ones will get out in front of it, and they'll come and talk to you about instructions, whether or not we might need to amend terms in the contract to adjust to keep their business going, because we need them. It's not a case of we'll just switch to another supplier, because if a supplier in a category is suffering, then the other suppliers in the category are going to be doing exactly the same things. I mean, I look after travel as well, and as you can imagine, the travel industry is decimated. They've got huge volumes coming in over the last couple of months, but it's going to go the opposite direction probably over the next year plus, where people just aren't going to travel so much. I think the other thing probably for me is just when you're talking to your suppliers, pick up on the key nuggets that they drop into conversations. If they're having to let people go at the end of the furlough scheme, or if you're seeing sort of subtle alterations of organograms or people moving into new roles, that's usually a clue that there's some kind of balancing of roles going on in those kind of places. Just keeping a very close eye when you're doing your regular business update meetings.
Yeah, and it's certainly going to be a tough time for a number of these people and for everybody to keep their eye on it. Peter, you're probably the most experienced person here in dealing with contractors and rates and things that make all sides of the process able to make enough money to continue. We're now in a completely new circumstance. We've got a recession that may be worse than most. We don't know how long it's going to last. We've uncertain, although we've got a return to business as usual volumes, as Jason said, we're uncertain how many of them are going to move and how quickly. So you don't know what capacity each of your contractors is working to. And then at the end of furlough, perhaps deferred taxation for those who went down that route. How easy is it going to be for us to provide, because the next question is going to get even worse, how easy is it going to be for us to provide the insurance companies with the services that they need should something major happen?
I guess that's what we're here to do, to make sure that that happens. So it means at the moment, I think as has been said already, the key thing for us is to communicate with the contractors, because we need to be certain that they can find their way financially through the current situation. All contractors shop in the same market. They all use labour that costs them roughly the same. The key thing for the contractors at the moment is how they organise their work. That's how they're going to make money. That's how they're going to survive. So we can help them with the organisation. So it does mean that as we get fluctuating volumes through from our clients, we can certainly then help the contractors in managing that so that the service continues. We can also as well help them with the management of customers, because that's quite critical at the moment, in that certainly the contractors are not seeing a return to normal. They're still seeing customers who are reluctant about having operatives in the homes. We're seeing contractors finding it difficult to safely carry out the works where you've got households where children are still off school at the moment. So what we're there to do is to help the contractor manage his work, which means then that the service that we're giving to customers and insurer clients continues. And I'm very positive and optimistic that will continue. We've worked very hard to make sure that's happened, and I think the industry has been performing great to make sure that people who've suffered incidents at their homes have really continued to get the service that they expect from us all.
And I guess the big challenge there going forward is to make sure that we've got plenty in hand, because we've talked over the years about surge plans, but here we are, hanging in the middle of an unprecedented situation that we could never have imagined 6 months ago. We're having a very dry August. Mike Lawson's graphs, which will appear next week, are telling us that at the moment, we could be heading for a subsurge. Of what size, I don't know. We're approaching autumn. Often it rains, winds blow. So how are we going to cope with all of this on top of that? I'm not talking, these don't have to be major surges. They just have to be surges or increases of claims. And all of a sudden, we're going to have more people certainly submitting claims, unsure about whether they want people in their house to be able to resolve it for them. And go through all the same emotions as we've got just now. How are one, us, and two, the suppliers going to cope and finance with that?
Is that to me, Alan?
No, sorry, that was to Jason. Beg your pardon. Sorry, I wasn't clear there. Jason.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. Yeah, I mean, I think the last couple of days actually have again sort of shown us just what impact the weather can have, as you say. It doesn't necessarily need to be a major event. It can be relatively localised. You know, we're seeing some localised flooding come through. You know, we've all got an eye on that as we head towards the autumn, and the potential further impact, as I said earlier, of COVID-19 and potential localised lockdown. So I think as an insurer, you know, we regularly review our risk contingency planning, our surge plans. We've done a lot of activity and continue to do a lot of activity in recent weeks around that. Looking at how that looks in a BAU type of environment when we move into surge, but also what that might look like in this COVID-19 environment. Engagement with the supply chain as well in relation to how they're reviewing their own surge plans and any changes or activity that they're putting in place to mitigate some of the impact that they will see. We've all experienced that downturn in claims at the start of lockdown. So bit of capacity in there, but again, suppliers are changing their structures to reflect some of that. So some have capacity. I think a big key is being flexible and being adaptable. But as Colin said earlier, it's being very close to your suppliers. It's having that engagement. It's understanding where they are as a business and what we then need to do to work with them to be able to support them, support us and our customers. We've all gone through selection processes and picked our panels for all the reasons that we believe they're going to deliver and provide a service for us. And we want to keep that where possible. So I think it's very, very incumbent upon us to have that open and honest dialogue with our supply chain.
I think that's very true. And some suppliers have performed amazingly. I think in one of the earlier we had Martin Oldroyd of Alternative Accommodation and Tim Icab explaining how they get everybody to work at home within 24, 48 hours, and also decanted everybody who was in alternative accommodation out in the hotel before they closed and got them into, flats or whatever. I mean, I think some of these things that have been amazing achievements that these businesses probably couldn't even know they were going to undertake. Colin, have you seen quite a lot of examples of your suppliers pulling out the stops in a way that perhaps they didn't know they could? That was for you, Colin.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. I think for us, I completely agree with Jason and Peter. The communication piece with the suppliers is what's going to get us all through this. The quicker we know about something, the quicker we can react and help them to react as well. I think September is going to be a crucial month for us, as one of the guys mentioned. When the schools go back, let's hope they do go back, you're going to have an opportunity then for about 6 weeks or so to get the repairs completed in all of those properties before the bad weather sets in. And if we have got any gaps or holes in roofs or anything along those lines that are going to let the weather in. That needs to get done quite quickly. The other thing I think we're going to see also towards the end of this month into September is a bit of COVID fatigue, if you like. We notice we keep a very close eye on our complaint trends. Thankfully, we don't get many of them, but when we do get them, we spend a bit of time on them. And we are starting to see people just getting a bit itchy with this has gone on a bit long. And I appreciate the COVID thing has been around, but I need my house fixed now. And I think we've got to find a way to deal with that. And that's why I think that 6-week window starting September, sort of the 1st onwards, up until the next half term is really going to be crucial to get as much done as possible. And to enable us to do that effectively, we've got to start planning those repairs right now.
Yeah, certainly think it's going to be a vital 6 weeks. But Peter, earlier on you mentioned in saying that, although business as usual has returned in terms of claims volumes, that hasn't released its way through to actual repairs within the contractor market. How badly do suppliers need more of these claims to come through in order to generate the turnover that will help them cope with increased volumes that might come with a surge?
I think that's absolutely vital. I mean, cash is king for a builder, isn't it? And there are things that we can do. We've been working throughout this very closely with contractors on ensuring, for example, that their debt has been cleared. We've been working closely with them on making sure that any cases that could be pushed through where they're external works, for example, that they could be. But the contractors need to know that there's a good pipeline of work there. They need certainty at the moment. And if I'm honest, I think that the truth is contractors actually wouldn't shy away from being faced with the challenge of a surge, be it subsidence, be it flooding. It'll bring us the usual challenges that it always does about how we prioritise different customers. It'll be harder this time because we've got to ensure social distancing, which practically will mean that the speed of completion of works will be slowed down. But going back to what I was saying earlier, that's the business of being a contractor, is managing your operatives on site. So I think what we've got to do as managers and insurers is get the claims through. They need them at the moment because they need that flow of work to keep businesses going so that they can be in a position to be healthy, financially ready to respond to a surge if it happens. But it's not something we should be fearful of. I think it could be a good thing.
And I think there will be one big organisational issue in that, because I can hear the noise coming from some of the contractors and suppliers that says, you're right, we'd love a surge, we'd love to challenge it, we'd love to turnover. Surge usually to suppliers comes an initial cash flow problem, and that coincide with the furlough, with deferred taxation, with COVID loan repayments for a lot of businesses of all sizes. So, Peter, do you think as an industry we'd have to look for a smart way around that between the insurers, the adjusters, the networks, to make sure that the suppliers can be paid and have enough cash to fulfil any surge?
I think that's absolutely right, Alan. I think there's always been an issue in the industry around trust. And, unfortunately, builders have a bad name. People, class builders with used car salesmen, don't they? And there's no reason to do that. And that means if we trust contractors, we can trust them to make sure they're going to finish what they start. One of the things that we have, for example, is a guarantee fund that means that we stand behind the contractor if something goes wrong, so that the insurer will not be out of pocket. And we talk to insurers about the fact you can trust, therefore, the builder by paying him up front. If we know we've got a £50,000 flood repair, our view is, let's give the contractor $45,000 at the start, give him a large chunk of money to help him finance the work and avoid problems that might come out because he's got a cash flow problem. So I think what you're saying, Alan, is absolutely right. If we do have an event, we need some new and different thinking where people can say, yes, the market needs something different. Let's trust our suppliers. I think that would be a great achievement.
And that needs a balance of things like guarantees, because of course the other side to that equation is if we give an advance of 45,000 to a contractor who might be struggling in cash flow, there is always the risk of in that on. So we would have to cover that in a lot of ways. Jason, agreeing with everything that Peter said there about how we support the suppliers, but how are we going to also support the customers through this next period? Because Colin rightly said there's COVID grumpiness, I think he said it was, coming through. But that's not universal. We've still got a population that's on all states of paranoia to not caring about COVID-19. How are we going to help our suppliers and our customers through this next phase?
Yeah, well, I think Colin referred to it there as COVID fatigue, and I've heard COVID crabbiness mentioned as well from colleagues as customers' patience starts to wear a little thin. We've all been in this environment for a period of time now, haven't we? And it's not just the customers, it's the supply chain as well. Similar to that relationship piece with suppliers, I think there's a huge importance on that communication with the customer and how we engage with the customer, how we're realistic and the supply chain is realistic in what can be done and over what period, how we can think of different solutions and different ways to achieve what the customer ultimately needs from us in terms of a claims settlement. And sometimes, and Peter was referencing just now, we've got to think outside the box and do things differently. Where in the past we might have done cash settlement, can we repair, or vice versa? What is it we can do differently to help progress that claim for the customer? But more importantly, keep that customer involved in that discussion and keep them informed. One of the biggest challenges I see is when claims go quiet for a customer and they're not sure what's the next stage, what's happening next for me. When's the repair going to take place? When's the next element of the repair happening? And often the contractor has got a perfectly good plan in place. It's just a case of making sure that is conveyed to the customer. At the risk of giving my age away and Rob Smale joking about me looking older earlier, I remember contracts when we used to reference SLAs for suppliers in terms of writing letters to customers. Now we can email, we can text, there's live chat, there's apps for interaction with customers. I think we've got to be very open to these different mediums as well in terms of how we communicate to the customer, but also encouraging that customer to be part of that claim journey. So they're not responsible for some of those delays.
Colin, I guess the next question, maybe we talk about looking after customers, but part of the balance of all of this is how confident are you? And I know you're not going to say you're not confident, but in reality, where are your worries concerned in making sure that if this COVID crabbiness increases and claims continue and people all of a sudden want to rush, that you're going to have sufficient capacity to deal with that, along with anything that might come along, like a bit of the surge, which I guess in repairs is a bit further down the line. But certainly if there's an autumn storm, are you confident in the capacity, or is that really one of the things you've just got to watch very, very closely?
Alan, I think you know me well enough that I'm massively confident that we won't have a problem with that. So it comes partly down to planning. It comes partly down to watching for the spikes. If you start seeing something go up month on month and it looks like an upward trend, then you need to stamp on it straight away. And by stamp on it, I mean have a conversation with whoever the supplier is who's causing the problem, but there could be a root cause that might turn out to be something not supplier related. It could be something we're doing internally that's causing difficulty, and often that turns out to be the case. And I think it is inevitable. You're always going to get more volume in winter. This is a household market. It is predominantly 2/3 of your claims come in the winter month, 1/3 comes in the summer months. We all know that. That's part of the way that we plan the nature of our business. There is, from an insurer's perspective, a little bit of flooding on the news actually is a good thing, because actually it reminds people of the value of the home insurance products that they get. And if I'm honest, at the moment, watching something different rather than Boris talk about COVID on the telly is actually a good thing anyway. So I do expect that. I feel very sorry for the poor people who are flooded, but at least it's something different to watch at the moment. I just think as long as we are consistently focused on a customer, if a customer phones in, they need something. They don't phone in because they're bored and they need a chat. So listening to every single call and making sure you act on every single conversation that you have with your customer is the way to avoid further problems.
I'm just interested, that's the first time I've heard an insurer being pleased about floods. So the next thing I'm going to ask
I said a small amount of
flood. Is it conflicting? Hey, Peter, just further to the discussion that we had, Ian Marsh came on and asked a question about making sure that everything gets passed through quickly if stage payments are made. I don't particularly see that as a problem because most of the networks we operate just pass stuff through straight away. But, you know, is that an issue that has to be watched? And we've just had another question asking, have we seen repair cost increases as a result of COVID compliance? Well, yes, we have. Is that still an issue? So that's two for you, Peter, there. You know, confirm that everybody passes the cash through quickly. But secondly, where are we with trying to figure out the cost increase of coping with the...
Okay, I mean, I think what was mentioned about looking at accounts obviously is vitally important. And like all management organisations, we spend a lot of time understanding the health of our suppliers, and that's a really key thing when we're talking about the payments, because I know when we talk about paying a builder money in advance, people can be very nervous about that, but that's one of the beauties of using a network manager like Repair Solutions, because we sit behind it. I would be very nervous personally if I were having a job at home of giving a builder money in advance. Nobody would do that, but the way good insurance repair organisations are set up and arranged means that those issues that you said need to be looked at, Alan, they're there, they've been dealt with contractually, financially. I really don't think they should be an issue at all. On costs, again, this is all about being as close as we can to contractors. So we're monitoring, as I'm sure other organisations are, we're looking to see what's happening to material prices. Big focus still on plasterboard, on the availability of products. At the moment, I think the picture is that most big merchants haven't pushed through large increases yet. But I think they're to come. And just to mention what we've spoken about in the past, COVID comes at a time of other issues for construction, like Brexit, like all of the issues around skills shortages, which means all of those are thrown into the pot and they're part of the challenge that the contractor has on costs. So the way that we have to manage that is to make sure that we know as much as the builder does. That's always the key thing, isn't it, you see, because when you're working with builders, you want to know what he knows. You want as much information as he's got, because if he's talking to you about the cost of building work, you've got to make sure that you know as much as he does so that you can manage it right. And that's where your focus has got to be, is getting knowledge.
Thanks for that, Peter. Jason, is that where you stand with it? It's about really understanding the forces that affect what happens to your suppliers to make sure that you're going to have them there and you're able to support them and they're able to provide the service you need.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, echo Peter's comments again. For us, it was very much around, and I'm sure it's the same for Colin and other colleagues in the industry. It's about maintaining those payments and keeping the cash flow going for the supply chain. We recognised early on as we went into lockdown, there were jobs that partially completed, contractors and various other suppliers had already made outlays for, that suddenly got put on hold. And the contractors then got a gap in finances. So, how do we keep some of those interim payments going and staged payments? And we were very keen to do that and support the suppliers. But equally, we needed them to be very honest and open with us. What are their drivers? What are the financial impacts they're seeing? What are the service impacts they're seeing? And as long as they're open and honest with us, we can work with them to find a solution and a way through that. And sometimes that's putting in place a temporary solution, and other times it's a more medium to longer term solution. But the clearer they are, probably starts with us being very clear about where we are in terms of what our volumes look like, what our forecasts look like and what that potential work is for them, and then working with them to understand what that impacts on, or what the impact on them is then like with that, and how do we help them through any of those challenges.
Thanks very much. Last word to Colin. Colin, day job, and understand from a few other things and things you've said, the LV in particular, you stay very close on a regular basis by holding presumably Zoom calls or some sort of thing with many of your suppliers now in groups. Is that the thing that's given you a really firm understanding of the problems they're facing and allowing you maybe to head off a few of the situations?
I think what it's allowed us to do is react to them. So Andy Williams, one of my colleagues, looks after our building contractor network, and some of my suppliers join that as well. And they have a sort of a monthly forum. It was monthly, I think, for the first 3 months. I think we've given everyone a break this month and we'll resume in September. But what it did do is it brought to light individual problems, but also multiple solutions. So doing a deal with the national builders to try and get hold of some bags of plaster when they were hard to get hold of, if not impossible, but also the costs of PPE equipment that we were asking them or insisting that they wear when they go and visit our customers. We hadn't built anything like that into the schedule of rates. Yes, if you're going to deal with an asbestos case, you'd be wearing it, but not normally to do standard building works, taking a kitchen up, putting the kitchen in, whatever it may be. So those kind of things were sort of raised quite early, and we could get a groundswell of feel from the contractors. This wasn't an individual's problem, this was a common problem, and therefore it gave us the ability to react by putting an additional amount onto scheduler rates for them to charge for PPE when they needed to use it. I think also it gave them an open channel to chase down things like some old debts. I think Peter mentioned earlier that's one of the things that they were looking at as well. We did very similarly, and I had a number of contractors come to me to chase debts because I'd welcomed them to come to me rather than having to go via the adjusters and ruin the relationship. They can come to me and then I can get my big stick out if I need to, which I didn't have to be fair. Most of them recognised that there was an issue that we needed to tidy up, and it's one of those things that always gets pushed to the back of the agenda, but actually became incredibly important at that point in time. I have to say, I can't take a lot of the credit for this. Andy Williams did most of this work. This is not me, so that one's for Andy.
Great. Yeah, thanks, man. And I mean, I think we've heard from quite a few insurers similar stories, which has been really effective, and hopefully that will hold up, that when we come out of this, some of these processes will be able to improve to stop us getting into these situations again. And I think there seems to be a good appetite for that. Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Jason. Jason, especially thank you because you chose not to retaliate to Rob, who probably still puts a 15-year-old picture on his LinkedIn page, but we'll see that on what it was. Thanks very much.
It's COVID fatigue, Alan. I looked a lot younger before March.
Yeah, and before you did your knee in. Thanks very much. Really appreciate it. It's good insight. It does give great communication to the industry and understands better who's dealing with things and who they can go to, which is great as well. Again, remember our building conference, which is very relevant to what we've heard today on the 1st of October. Our home event, which is going to be about 4 days long, somewhere in the week commencing the 9th of November. I'm looking forward to some exciting news we're going to share with you on that. Next week, the Subsidence podcast, when we get an update on where we are and on certainly in the major issue of clay subsoil shrinkage. The following week, we'll take a little bit of a review from the guys who were first guests on our webinars, and we'll look forward to that. As I always say, any of you want to do on that, alan@iloveclaims.com. On any of the events, if you want to contact us, talk about sponsorship or getting your brand a little bit more up front, either myself or our commercial director, Nick Swell at NIC, Nick at iloveclaims.com for that contact. As always, this is your industry. You make the difference, not us. What we hopefully do is give a platform for you to hear some great things you've heard today, and to make sure that we all have a communication that we can move forward and we can learn and hopefully make the industry better tomorrow from what we learned today. Thanks very much for listening. As I say every week, COVID-19, as you've heard from what we said today, is still very much out there. It's still with us. So please look after yourselves, look after your businesses, look after your colleagues, and look after your families. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.